What's up, Taiwan? I'm Jaime Ocon with news from here in Taiwan and around the world. TSMC founder Morris Chang said he's hit all of his goals as lead envoy at this year's Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit in San Francisco. Joyce Tseng has more.
Taiwan's lead envoy, TSMC founder Morris Chang, has wrapped up his 7th APEC Leader Summit here in San Francisco, saying he's achieved all that he set out to do, namely promote Taiwan as a reliable global partner. Chang also said he's met with more top-level officials this year than ever before. The highest-level U.S. official Chang met with was Vice President Kamala Harris, and he expressed optimism about continued U.S.-Taiwan exchange. Chang also said that peace and security in the Indo-Pacific was a priority for both countries.
台湾将持续向 APEC 各经济体携手同心，在瞬息万变的国际形势中，确保台湾的经济利益及经济发展，同时为区域的繁荣与稳定做出贡献。
To close out the summit, Chang hosted a dinner for the delegation, which was attended by surprise guest, former U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Last summer, Pelosi made a controversial trip to self-ruled Taiwan, which China claims as its own, prompting Beijing to cut off military communications with Washington in response. That line of contact has just been restored after U.S. President Joe Biden met with Chinese President Xi Jinping in a closely watched sit-down on the sidelines of APEC earlier this week. When asked by TaiwanPlus at the banquet how she thinks her trip to Taiwan last year affected peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait, Pelosi had this to say.
See, there were 4 senators had gone like a week or 2 before me, but nobody said boo, right? But when I went, okay, 34 years, we had a lot of history there that they had to speak of. But people around the world and in the Congress, in a bipartisan way, have been very supportive of that trip.
Though Washington maintains the one China policy, Pelosi said the U.S. will not stand for Taiwan being ignored. These tensions will be in the spotlight in less than 2 months as Taiwan heads to the polls to pick its next president. And with each candidate having their own views as to Taiwan's ties with China and the U.S., the future of the relationship between the 3 countries could be set to change. Justin Wu and Joyce Tseng in San Francisco for TaiwanPlus.
A group of activists are rallying in Taipei to show solidarity with Palestine, but critics have slammed the organizers for being pro-China. Sally Jensen has more.
Activists are protesting outside the U.S.'s de facto embassy in Taipei. They say the U.S. is complicit in Israel's recent escalation of violence against Palestinian people living in Gaza and are calling for a ceasefire. Thousands have died in Israel and Palestine after Israeli defense forces launched airstrikes on the enclave of Gaza in response to attacks by the Hamas militant group on October 7th, escalating a centuries-long conflict in the Middle East. Taiwan's government officially supports Israel in the conflict, but several civil society organizations are showing solidarity for the Palestinian cause, including some of these Taiwan-based associations. But this march and some of its organizers and participants are accused of being pro-China and supporting China's claims over Taiwan. One of these groups is Parallel Government. TaiwanPlus asked them if they'd heard the criticism leveled at the march.
我希望你们作为媒体工作者不要跟国家口径一致，就是在这种任何抗议的时候就把它 frame 成中国在支持，真的是非常愚蠢的 ridiculous media strategy。我不想接受访问了，谢谢。
The controversy surrounding this protest and its organizers shows that while there is support for Palestine in Taiwan, the issue, just like in the rest of the world, is deeply political. Andy Xue and Sally Jensen in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
A coalition deal between two of Taiwan's presidential candidates has collapsed just 3 days after it was signed. It's a blow for the opposition's chances of winning the January election and a boost for Taiwan's ruling party. Stash Butler reports.
The deal is off. Taiwan's two leading opposition candidates for president in January's election will not work together as planned. That's after one of them, Kuo-yu, the dark horse former mayor of Taipei, pulled out of the agreement that he signed just 3 days ago. Now, under that agreement, the party, Ke's party, the Taiwan People's Party, and the opposition Kuomintang or KMT agreed to use opinion polls to decide which of their two candidates should be president and which should be vice president. Now, Ke says he's pulling out of the deal because the two sides couldn't reach an agreement on how to calculate the margin of error for those polls. The KMT says its method of calculation was correct. Ke says his method has more scientific basis. Here's what he and his team had to say.
在野整合，我觉得还是必要的。我们在想办法在野整合一下，找出一组最强的候选人一下来赢得选举这才是我们的目标。那所以，我们还是期望说可以跟国民党继续协商的但是不要要求我们让6%，然后叫我们自己弃械投降。
Now, the failure of this deal is seen as a big victory for the ruling party candidate, current Vice President Lai Ching-te of the DPP, or Democratic Progressive Party, and his chances of succeeding the current president, Tsai Ing-wen. Now, Lai has been leading in the polls, but those same polls also suggested he'd lose to a united opposition. Now, Election Day on January 13th. It's 56 days away, or precisely 8 weeks. But it's actually only 5 days away until the deadline comes for the registration of presidential candidates. Now, Kuo-yu and the KMT say that a deal on a presidential coalition between their two parties can still be reached, but time is running out for them to agree it. Luffy Lee and Stash Butler in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
President Tsai Ing-wen's main rival in the 2020 election is returning to frontline politics. Han Kuo-yu was the opposition Kuomintang or KMT's candidate in the last presidential race. After he lost and was recalled as a city mayor, Han spent years out of the limelight. Now, the KMT has announced he's top of its party list for January's election. That means Han is guaranteed a seat in the legislature if his party gets more than 5% of the vote, a figure it is expected to comfortably surpass. Taiwan's Navy has started construction of a prototype light warship focused on air defense. At a ceremony in southern Taiwan on Friday, President Tsai Ing-wen said the new warship is part of an effort to modernize the military. Taiwan often faces military pressure from China, which operates its own warships and fighter jets near the country. Tsai said the new lighter frigate would boost the military's ability to respond to threats.
我们持续迈向国防现代化，轻型巡防舰的吨位小，建造期程短，可让我们海军在执行任务的时候减少主战舰的耗损，在兵力运用上也更具有弹性。
Japan is drilling simulated beach landings this weekend as part of countrywide military exercises. The drills are part of 11 days of exercises held around Japan aimed at prepping the country for a potential conflict in East Asia. They included air defense exercises against an attack on the country's nuclear reactors. Japan doubled its defense spending last December to counter perceived threats from North Korea and China. Back in Taiwan, 10 people have been charged with breaking Taiwan's National Security Act after allegedly spending over a year gathering military intelligence for China. This is Lu Zhixian. Once a coach for Taiwan's national Diabolo team, he and 9 others are now facing charges under the National Security Act. Starting in 2022, Lu and his crew were allegedly paid around $180,000 by an unknown Chinese source to spy on Taiwan's military.
经甲官侦查终结，于今日以违反国家安全法、为大陆地区发展组织等罪嫌，起诉鲁姓被告等10人。
Lu's team included 5 Taiwanese military personnel, 3 Taiwanese nationals, and 1 Chinese national. All have been charged with breaking Taiwan's National Security Act. But Chinese espionage is not a new phenomenon in Taiwan's military. Beijing uses spies to get a better understanding of how prepared Taiwan is for a conflict. And as China seeks to take control of Taiwan, it tries to recruit military personnel to learn more about potential weaknesses. Taiwan's military says that soldiers are vigilant in reporting suspected spy cases.
很多共谍案实际上是我们官兵检举了以后，然后我们跟检警去配合，那么做一个追查。
As Taiwan's military continues to weed out spy cases from within its ranks, it's a reminder that threats from China are sometimes closer than they seem. A fresh batch of immigration officers have graduated from a training program. Laura Stewart takes a look at the skills needed to pass the exam.
Trained to the nines, these newly graduated immigration officers know what to do in an emergency. Thousands of people applied for Taiwan's immigration officer exam. Now these top 45 trainees are qualified to take on border security jobs. They've undergone a year of physical and professional training and have the skills to handle situations like containing and arresting a runaway at border control. Chen Qiaoyi worked in ID verification at Taipei's Taoyuan airport for 6 years before joining the program. She's come across forged and altered passports.
查过驾照，所以渐渐的觉得自己好像其实是很喜欢国境这个单位。长官跟我的同事的支持鼓励下，我才开始就是慢慢准备考试。
Officers need more than just physical skills. With more migrant workers coming to Taiwan from Southeast Asia, immigration officers are now expected to have relevant language abilities.
那我本身就是除了英文的专长跟我报考的印尼文之外，我自己之前也曾经在韩国交换过1年，所以我精通韩文。
The Interior Ministry says officers that have the necessary physical and language attributes will strengthen Taiwan's border security.
在未来，各位在第一线执勤的时候所获取的经验，还有从我们各位学长姐身上所去学习到的，甚至是未来进一步的科侦的能力，我想都是需要大家进一步来加强。
With this new class of qualified officers, the ministry hopes Taiwan's borders will remain safe and secure. Eason Chen and Laurel Stewart for TaiwanPlus.
Members of Taiwan's indigenous Bunun people are demanding that the remains of their ancestors held at a local university be returned. Tiffany Wong has the story.
Members of one of Taiwan's indigenous Bunun people gathered outside the gates of National Taiwan University to demand the return of their ancestors' remains, only to be blocked by police. For years, they've been demanding the remains be returned. Their ancestors' graves were excavated by the College of Medicine at Taiwan's most prestigious university for research purposes over 60 years ago. School authorities' response to the protest has raised concerns over freedom of speech.
我们认为此举不仅侵犯言论及集会的游行自由，更显现校方无法兼容异议，对此次侵害人权的作为公开道歉。
But the indigenous protesters say apologies are not enough, and that it's time their ancestors returned home.
我们的祖先63年了，流浪在台北。
Members of the Mayuan Bunun are demanding compensation and the return of their remains. In its response, the university said there was no legal basis for a payout. But activists say the university's focus on money misses the broader issue.
将原住民族塑成贪婪爱钱、前面要补助、补偿金的形象。我们斥责校方将离国返还问题概括成求偿问题。
The protests come just weeks after 4 warrior skulls taken from the Taiwan Indigenous group were returned from a university in Scotland. The skulls had been taken during a Japanese invasion of southern Taiwan and finally given their proper ceremonial rites over a century later. For now, the remains of the Bunun indigenous are kept in 43 boxes stored by the university, waiting for their own chance to return home. James Lin and Tiffany Wong for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching What's at Taiwan. Finally, take a look at these traditional horseback fishers in Belgium. They say climate change is impacting their catch. I'm Jaime Ocon. Take care and see you next time.